Technology, man.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So look, I don't know. I've never done one of these at this time, i.e., 5:30 p.m. Singapore.
Oh
That
yeah.
region. I tend to feel. I mean, I don't know what you feel about it. That the best time for people to join in a live chat is probably the last thing they do at the end of the weekend,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you can imagine 5:30 p.m. in Singapore on a Sunday. So yeah, so
Yeah.
don't worry about it. I'm hoping a lot of people can see that Gary's live and they join in, and hopefully they will follow through with the conversation. So
Well,
regardless of who
it doesn't
joins,
matter. Then we just talk to each
yeah,
other.
exactly. While we still can, we can talk about. No, I'm not even going to try. Okay,
No.
let's get into it. We're recording this anyway, so you don't want me to be able to blackmail you afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Um, I want to talk about a few things. Uh, we've just talked about it in practices. No one here now, so I can just go into it systematically. A lot of the stuff that I'm saying may or may not make it into the clip. It really comes down to, is the narrative coming through with just what you're saying, or when you add my
Yeah.
bit to it, does it make it easier? Let me start the timer. Okay. Okay. So the very first question. This is a community thing. I'm trying to talk to a lot of people from everywhere around the world, New Zealand as well. Thank you very much. You're actually the first person officially to be doing this from New Zealand. Being a Kiwi myself, I haven't actually worked there for close to 20 years. I left in 2006. I don't know when you left South Africa. I'm assuming, or yeah, when you would have come to Singapore around the same time, and maybe just a little bit after, or maybe 2007. I'm assuming.
2008.
Okay, all right. So anyway, I mean, I've been out of that market for a long time. One of the things I would say about the New Zealand market is because of its remoteness. Putting advertising aside, it's a remote nation. Culturally, it's very fixed in how it does things. So those things don't really change. The weather, I think, also doesn't help matters. And I guess what I'm speaking of is in terms of what prime time is. Off peak hours when you come home from work. It's cold. You want to get the hell out of there. You get home. You put on the fire if you still have fireplaces. I know a lot of you can make any new houses in New Zealand with fireplaces now. You put on the heat, make your dinner, and you end up sitting in front of the television for the most part for most demographics, which has made New Zealand one of those unique markets. It's a very European thing anyway, but it is a unique market in the sense that TV or long form content, or sorry, rather 30-second format or 1 minute format storytelling is still great, and which is fantastic from a creative perspective. Uh, what that does is I think it makes you weatherproof a little bit from the onslaught of the new iteration of advertising, call it digital advertising or otherwise. AI obviously is affecting all of us. As a guy now who's been there for quite a few years, moving from very different markets, and we'll talk about your different markets in the next part of the question. What are you seeing is happening in a market that is traditionally very much unflappable when it comes to the new ways of doing advertising or the way that advertising is being absorbed? How are you seeing it coming through in New Zealand today?
Well, I think the one thing to note is like I've only been here about 6 years now. I moved in 2019, April 2019. After 12 years in up in Singapore and living and working around Asia and the region and that. And I mean, you know the market up in Asia. TV isn't like as big, especially like in a small market like Singapore. TV is one of the channels that you would use, or film on TV or free to air TV. But most of the stuff you're using, like pretty much all touch points, all media, digital especially, and that was kind of like the standard, and you could see the film, the nature of film, and all the work that we did in and around the region was less and less, and that was back in shit like 2020. The film was dropping off. The budgets were tiny. I think we were doing pieces of work for about 180K and up in Singapore. But when I moved to New Zealand in 2019, it was actually quite interesting. It was quite fun because basically arrived and film and free to air and TV broadcast was still big. My very first brief was a piece of film, 30-second, and then followed by a 60-second. And I hadn't done work like that with those kind of budgets. The budgets here were actually pretty large. And yeah, that first job was like 3, 4 times the budget that I would have in Singapore. And that was actually quite interesting because you don't get that simplicity of like one single media to focus on. You had the whole wheelhouse to use. So that was actually quite refreshing. And then since then, I've noticed in the 6 years, New Zealand, like you said, is on the edge of the world. It makes great work. There is this thing of like, there's something in the water, the people, the culture, the work and the way people think here is really interesting, and that's why it makes really great work. But when it comes to film, it was quite interesting because film was still big because people watch TV. If you want to hit the whole of New Zealand, you put a single ad before the news and you hit all 5 million people. It's as simple as that. It's still one of the strongest mediums that we've got here, to hit mass media, and mass market. So I think like New Zealand was very different from any other market. South Africa was the same, but I think South Africa kind of TV kind of slowly started going away. Radio is a big medium, but here it was film. And I think that's something that over the 6 years I've seen slowly decline, and kind of I think now I think where Singapore was in 2017 or 2016. New Zealand's kind of getting there now. It's like the film market isn't as big. You got to hit all the other channels. You got to hit all digital as a major focus. Clients have downweighted their budgets on doing mass media like a piece of film. So with that, the industry here is trying to get to grips with it. And you can see the production industry, everything in and around the production industry is actually slowly starting to change. And then you put on top of that the massive change that's happening globally with AI. And I think AI is now coming in, speeding up and changing things in other ways that is compounding the change that we would naturally go through to catch up with the rest of the world. And with the advent of AI, and I know everyone's talking about AI and what it's going to do and the jobs it's going to take and the changes in the industry, it is going to speed up, production or production efficiencies. All the clients are already talking about what can AI do, how can AI solve problems, how can it make things faster and cheaper, which is always the concern. Fast and cheap, it doesn't necessarily mean great, unfortunately. But I think New Zealand's still a very good market for film. We've got great production companies, great directors here across Australia as well, but there is a slow decline. And in the last 2 years, I've noticed the quality has kind of dropped slightly, but
Mm.
not just here. I think globally, the quality of film is kind of not where it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I started by saying New Zealand has always been very much pushing the agenda of film or film content storytelling, and you've touched on it. But as you've been talking, it's occurred to me what it is also the fact that because of how TV has become such a big part of the media landscape in New Zealand, crafting is a big thing. I think it's not even so much about the channel on what we were seeing in Singapore versus what happens in New Zealand. New Zealand brands historically have invested in crafting. When you mentioned your first brief when you moved to New Zealand for the first time, I'm reminded when I started in Wellington Saatchi's, and as a junior, I started my career there. And as a junior, my first brief was for Telecom New Zealand. It was the one where they had these birds dancing to a music, some like a cheap
Oh,
promo
yeah.
TV ad, and we had like a 60,000 New Zealand dollar music budget.
Yeah.
And I compare that to what happens in Singapore. When was the last time we use licensed music? You end
Yeah.
up having to create fake knockoff versions of something that you like during the planning stage,
Yeah.
right? And you mentioned AI, and I get how AI is obviously, and yes, you're right. Everyone is obviously talking about it. We can't have our heads buried in the sand. But I guess what I'm wondering is, as you started explaining it, are the changes you think? I know you said you've only been there for 6 years, I think. Um, do you think the the acceleration of the changes to this primary channel form that you use, do you think it's changed because of AI or just inevitability of the market and the fact that the wave is just now finally coming to New Zealand?
No, I think it's exactly that. The waves finally coming to New Zealand. Like it was lagging behind the rest of the world in terms of catching up, I suppose. But the reason why I came to New Zealand wasn't necessarily because of the great filmic market. I mean, they do make great film, but New Zealand makes great work and has traditionally made great work that is different. It's like it's always different shapes or it's odd. And I think there's something interesting about Kiwis and how they think, and I really do believe there is something in the water, and just the way they tackle problems is interesting. The film market and all that kind of stuff is catching up with the rest of the world in terms of, it was lagging behind a bit. I think to your point on AI, you know, everyone's talking about it, but AI will speed up everything in multiple fashions, and it's just one of those things where we're going to have to get used to what it is and how we play with it. Like, I don't think most creatives are quite excited by it, because it's kind of a collaboration tool. You can use it to do something. You can speed up things where you're a little bit slow. You can bounce ideas off it, which is kind of interesting. So I think it's going to be an exciting time. I think production agencies and companies and that are going to have to embrace how it builds and works with their business. But yeah, in general, it all comes back down to the idea and the shape of the idea and the great work people want to make. Film will always be part of the communication mix, and especially in New Zealand, because you can hit everyone on TV. I don't think film will ever disappear because it's a market of 5 million or over 5 million people. Make one piece of film or screen content, you can actually hit most of the markets. So while you have the rest of the media, why wouldn't you use one of the most powerful pieces? I think it's just now how we tackle it and play with it, I suppose, in a different way with decreasing
To that
budgets.
end, to that end, we were talking earlier this week, and you did mention we didn't get into specifics. I thought I wanted you to leave it for the call. You mentioned there was an agency recently in Auckland had done something with AI that people have kind of looked up and noticed. I don't actually know the example, but maybe you can explain a little bit more on and what you think that impact has had. Is it more like the first one through the gates type of thing, or what is it that has stirred up the talk around this particular campaign you mentioned?
Oh, I mean, the one I mentioned actually was for a low-cost mobile company called Skinny, and the agency's Colenso, and a great team at Colenso. Simon Vickers, an amazing creative, and they launched a piece of work which used a clone of an ambassador, and they put out a competition to call for someone to be the ambassador of the brand and sign their rights away and become AI'd and cloned, in every way, from voice through to look. And basically, I think it's quite interesting because you can see, like, and this is what I mean by Kiwis and just the mentality of Kiwis. We run towards it. And I think there's something quite nice, like, and they've run towards it and they've created an entire piece out of AI, cloning this woman who lives in the middle of the country, and now she is a cloned AI ambassador for this Skinny brand, and they're having fun with it, like, and I think that's the exciting part. Like, you can have fun and move forward, and I think that's what our industry is all about: having fun and just trying to make cool work. And as much as it's Calenza and I'd rather it be us, but yeah, they're doing good work and they make us do good work, and we all push each other, and I think that's kind of cool. So yeah.
One of my earliest guests was a Kiwi guy who lives in New York and who has lived in New York for a good 10 years now. And I think New Zealand has almost the opposite problem of New Zealand has the opposite problem of New York, and Singapore is kind of in between the two. In New York, the way we were discussing it, it's the reason why not a lot of good things get done because everyone's behind glass buildings across 75 different floors, and clients are across another, other end of the place, and there's 5, 6 floors there. It's that decision by committee, and I think it's not just the fact that New Zealand has only 5 million people. It's you got to get shit done. Let's just
Yeah.
What's the brief? This is the objective. Let's get it done. And I think in many ways that's very liberating. And I think that's another reason why New Zealand has always been punching above its weight, which is why I found it. Singapore has been yours and my home for the longest time. I was there for 13 years. You were there maybe a little bit less or more. I was always surprised that Singapore, which is also a market of a similar amount of people, did suffer the problem that I didn't think would happen, the decision by committee. And I think that might be the nature of the fact that it's an APAC market, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot more eyeballs on everything that happens there. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I call it the layer cake of bullshit. And I think it's what happens in markets, especially like Singapore, which is a very similar in size to New Zealand, but it is a regional base. So when you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with 30, 40 people in a marketing department that have to go through the layers. So you're doing presentation after presentation just to get to the CMO who's going to potentially make a decision before you even get into anywhere near the CEO. And the great thing about New Zealand, one of the main reasons why I came here was the work they make, but also when you present, sometimes you're doing your very first presentation to the CEO who signs it off in the room and you're like a go. So there's no layer cake of shit to get through. And I think that's actually important to make great work. You can't go through those layers where you just get cut down, because by the time you get to the end, your baby is just filled with all these cuts. So I think it's good when you got less people to get to the decision maker, and then when you have a good relationship with the decision maker, like most agencies in New Zealand, do. They have long-term relationships with most of their clients. It's not a market that constantly pitches. So for example, we've had McDonald's now at DDB for, if you can believe it, 47 years. Like
I was at
that
DB. I
is,
used to work on McDonald's. As in, I
yeah,
was at DB in Auckland. I've done McDonald's ads
yeah.
at the same agency. So, yeah, the
So
relationships are great.
47 years, and Mario Halloran, who's the ex-global, CEO, he actually started working in McDonald's and then at DDB and then started running McDonald's and then started running DDB and then ran DDB in the world. But over that time, it's been 47 years. So I think it's pretty interesting, like the relationship length or the length of relationships here.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into that now, but one of the running themes I've been noticing when talking to people like yourself in other markets, the one thing, besides AI being on the lips of everyone to say that this is the change and this is what's happening, the one thing that is probably not related to AI, certainly not directly anyway, is the fact that the relationships between clients and agencies are just not the same as they used to be, even 5 years ago. Well, maybe even 10 years ago in many respects. And all the efficiencies, let's call it, that have been put upon agencies through clients and through the CMOs, it hasn't really made things any easier. Anyway, we've already started talking about different markets. So with that, I think it's a good segue to the next question. And I think, we obviously met in Singapore when we were working there. My question is related to, if I'm going to hopefully create clips, and this is going to go up on our Instagram and our TikTok page, and the idea here being it's a community thing, and I want more people to talk. I don't think enough of us talk to each other, and it's not out there for public consumption, and hopefully this is going to help. So I wanted to use an example of yours. It's a career path that I didn't choose myself, or rather in the very specific way I think you've always looked at your career path. And I'm wondering for someone listening in later on for the clips or even live right now, hi guys, thank you for joining, is you started your career in South Africa, you did a couple of years in London, I think you went back home for a little bit, then Singapore for a very long stint, and now New Zealand. And it's taken me a long time to realize that you've kind of had this plan all along. You've always known, and maybe you'd like to say how you saw what the end goal was, but it seemed like you knew when you started. I don't want to be number one. I don't necessarily want to be in one market that I like. I'm happy to move. I think it's important to move, and it's all for this greater objective. Could you talk about your personal objective throughout your career and how you stayed on that path and how it might explain your journey shifts up to this point?
I think it all started because I mean I've lived in a lot of houses and a lot of places and a lot of countries. I've got a bit of Irish in me, so there's maybe a bit of gypsy coming through there. But when I was in South Africa, I always had itchy feet to go and explore. You know, my dad was Irish, my mom's English, and there was this kind of you want to go see other parts of the world. And also, you're living at the tip of Africa, kind of like when you're living in New Zealand. Like Kiwis want to go and explore from here, the same as Australians. It's the same with South Africans. So there was always this innate desire to travel, and I think working in South Africa, I was working at one of the best agency, if not the best agency, TWA Hunter Scaris, making great work, and it's you from there you're making world class work from the tip of Africa. But I knew that you had to go and get European experience, like so. Part of the plan was to get a good base in South Africa, but then get to Europe, mainly London, because London's a good base for advertising. And then I thought, like, I want to get European experience, mainly UK, and then work a bit into Europe and see how that goes. And I did that for a few years. And, London's a hard market. Like, if you crack it, you crack it. And some people I know who have been there now 15, 20 years, if not more, and they've nailed it. But it is a hard market. It's a hard market to break into. I was fortunate enough that I had worked with some great people, but then I had the opportunity to head back to actually South Africa, and that was a big moment because it was kind of like you had to decide where your career is going. So it made me really think about like you got to plan your path a bit. Like I was going, if I've made it from South Africa into the UK, I've done pretty much the hard yards to get a grounding in the UK. To then go back to South Africa was quite a big moment. Um, but what I decided was it was for a big job. Who's running a big brand, and across not just South Africa, it was running it into a bit of the region of Africa. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So I could get more African experience. I've had a bit of European experience, born and bred in South Africa, but go back, run a bigger brand, and just get my like teeth into that. And then it's good for the CV. But the plan was never to stay in South Africa for that long. Plan was just to get back, use that as another leap point. And I always had my eye, funnily enough, my eyes always been on New Zealand since I was a young student studying advertising. But New Zealand wasn't on the cards yet. It was kind of like it was too far removed. I wanted to get from Africa, and I knew if I had African experience, had European experience, I would need Asian experience. China's a big market. Like you got to get experience in Asia. So when I managed to get luckily enough, Damon, who is the ECD, Damon Stapleton, who funnily enough lives in New Zealand now, and actually brought me here from Singapore, sent me to Singapore from South Africa, which was quite an interesting thing, and that was on a pitch. And when I got the job offer to go work there, we jumped at it because it was like Singapore's a regional market. It's Asia for beginners. It's an speaking country for business, and you can work into the region and around the region and like across 13, 14 different markets. So that's why I spent so long there, actually. I think it was 12 years in total. And the reason why I was there for 12 years is I wanted to understand all the markets. So I've done a lot of work in Vietnam, Thailand, up in China. I worked across Middle East. I still did Africa, from Singapore. But I basically knew how each market works, from Malaysia to Thailand to Vietnam, and understanding the cultures and what drives work in those cultures and making work that goes across was an important thing if you want to do a global role. So like my ambition was be global. And in order to do global, you need to hit different markets and need to understand markets. So that was a big thing for me. So that's why I was in Singapore for so long. And then I think the thing that drove me here was I got the regional, thing under my belt. I managed to create decent work for big brands like Singapore Airlines, Standard Chartered, but the thing that was missing was great work. Like you make regional work, which is always good, but I wanted to make great work. And the one market that makes great work is New Zealand because they make different work, and I wanted to start making different work
So,
again.
Gary, there's a bit of a lag, and that's fine. Hopefully, it'll fix itself. Thank you for that. I guess I was asking, besides your personal career, how you went from A to B to C. And this is going to come a little bit into play when we talk about the community section, which is
Yeah.
about the people. It's I guess what I'm first of all, how about this? You said you realized, or the light bulb moment happened when you returned to South Africa after London. How many years into your career was that when you came to do the Nissan Africa thing? Like how many years into
Uh,
your career was that?
must have been about 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Okay, that
Um,
sounds about right. So
Yes, but it was like 5 or 6 years. I knew, like, I mean, ultimately, like when people were asking me, it would be like, what do you want to be eventually? It would be, I want to run a network, like as a global CCO, if there were CCOs at that point in time. And I knew I wanted to do that. And I was looking up to the likes of people all over the world and just watching how they planned their path. And I think it's important for all creatives to actually have like a 3, 5, and potentially an 8-year plan. Although it's hard to do now because things change so quickly, and I mean, things move at the speed of light now. But I think it's important to keep revisiting your plan and just go, are you on the path, or do you need to rejig the path? So my plan was to get experience, Africa, Europe, Asia, come down to this part of the world, which is, Australasia and New Zealand, do a bit of work into Australia. And that means I've covered pretty much half of the world. And now it leaves, the Americas, so that could be the next step. Who knows? But things are moving. It like now it doesn't matter where you live. You can actually run stuff from different countries. Like we could run a global network from New Zealand. So my plan has to kind of shift as things move. So yeah, the plan's ever evolving, but the point is to try and have a plan. Make sure you got something. Otherwise,
yeah,
you
and
just
we're
sit in
gonna
one place for too long.
sorry, yeah, and you're right. Uh, the thing you mentioned at the end there about are people making such plans for their career now in advertising? Uh, I guess you and I have both been in advertising roughly around the same time. While I didn't have that type of ambition of global domination, that kind of objective, I would say one thing that is still similar of our generation of advertising people, creative people, even planning and everything else people, is there was a faith in the industry. You know what I mean? It's very hard to sit down. Gary Steele is not going to go sit down if he's at a checkout counter of a supermarket to say, in 10 years I want to run this. That's not the same thing. The industry that we kind of grew into had such potential, and we were seeing that potential, and that kind of fed those ambitions, those aspirations. And I think it's again, while you and I haven't had that same kind of end goal, it was still grounded on the same foundation, which is advertising is fucking sexy. I want to do this. and I want to get whatever I want to get out of it, and there is something for me to get out of it. And things are changing. You're right, and I think that's a good point to then talk about this as a person who's been in a creative leadership role now for hell more than 15 years, I imagine at this point. You would have noticed how, excluding people of our generation or when we started advertising, the new crop of people within your teams under your leadership, and seeing that motivation, that hunger to get stuff done, even in a market like New Zealand, do you see it waning in any way? Do you see the new generation of people are not having that same level of excitement and hunger for advertising now, even in the context of a market like New Zealand where crafting is really big? Film is still cool. Storytelling, doesn't live and die by committee. How are you seeing those changes compared to even Singapore, even in the last few years there, and then now? And are you seeing changes?
I think I still think it's pretty exciting. Like I love what I do. I love ideas and I love creativity. And I think, I can't see myself doing anything different. Like I think creativity is the biggest force that you can have, and it's the most effective force in business. It can change things, it can grow business, it can create new products. It's why we get up in the morning, and why I get up in the morning. And I think I'm still excited by it. And I think what I've noticed is when I came into the industry, and it was a big industry. It was an exciting industry. People knew about advertising. Some people who were in the industry were kind of like rock stars. And I think that over time has been eroded, right? So I don't think the new generation, I think, know much about it. It's not as sexy as it was when I entered into it, and I stumbled into advertising. I didn't have it as a plan, but it's not as sexy. People don't know about it and what's in the industry. Like our industry is actually pretty big. While it's small, it's big. It's got a lot of opportunity, and I think a lot of the young talent coming through schools don't actually know what they can do in advertising. I mean, if you come into the industry, you could be like a colorist, you could be an illustrator, you could be someone who deals in sound, a sound engineer. There's so many paths to play, um, but no one knows about it. And I think that's actually the problem. Like in a place like New Zealand, you can see the talent pool is getting smaller and smaller because they would rather do other careers that they know about. I think the number one job in the world that most kids want to be now is an influencer. So it's not necessarily a sexy business, and it doesn't make people money. So the money side of it, like they know they want to do investment banking and all that. And I think that's all damaging the industry because we need to build the reputation. We've got like kind of a bit of a reputation issue. We need to build our own brand as advertising, make it sexy again, and start attracting more talent, working with talent in schools before they think about going into college. Just getting the idea of what a creative industry is like and what you can do to be in a creative industry. And I think the doors have opened wider, with creators and the creator economy. There's no reason why anyone can't be in this industry. And I think it's truly rewarding if you get it right. I mean, I've been in this now for like 28 years or whatever it is. And, I wouldn't be where I am now, traveling the world, doing great shoots, meeting great people like yourself. It's given me everything. And I think it's a cool industry. We just need to make it cool again.
Here's where I would disagree a little bit, and I'm speaking in terms of New Zealand only. So you said you stumbled into advertising. You didn't plan for it. Now I kind of did plan for it. So I have a business undergrad. So I went to business school AUT, and then I was going to become a planner. And my favorite lecturer, the Strat lecturer, who also was dean of business school at the time, Doug Lloyd, I said, look, I don't know if I really want to do this. What should I do? And he said, go down to this place. We have a course here at the communication school, but go to the one they have down the road. At the time, it was on Queen Street. I don't know if they still are, but media design school, right? Ad school.
Yeah, still
And
there.
so I'm a product that has come through that side of advertising. And I have to say, even the guy who had graduated with a business degree at the time in Auckland didn't know enough about creative to think that that's what he wanted to do. There was options and opportunities that you people would push you not directly through the industry, but in these institutions, let's say education institutions, and we found ourselves in it. And once we found ourselves in it, it was rewarding. I think at the end of the day, those media design schools and stuff like that, it's still there. Nothing's changed. I don't think that's because if that's the case, then what is the function of these existing design schools? You know, like in Singapore, you have Nian Polytechnic. These are feeder programs into advertising. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think there's got to be a little bit more than that. Because at the end of the day, even if you assume that there's just as many graduates 20 years ago or 20 whatever years ago when I started, and now in the last 5-6 years that you've been around, that they're still producing the same amount of graduates. There is an economics. I mean, you mentioned economics from a point of view of access to knowing about the industry or how cool and sexy it is. But then there's the economics of, like you mentioned, I think you used the word investment banker. That same media design school graduate today would say, I'd rather go work at Weta than work at DDB. Because there's still something more pure and unmolested about that aspect of it that our business is not producing. What do you think? I mean, that's the reason I don't know if it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's so many opportunities, like going to work at Weta would be amazing. I think I'd love to go work at Weta. But there's also something really cool about doing, work that uses emotion to sell and drive people's behavior. I think like we can fundamentally shift and create business and grow business, and I think that's quite exciting and powerful. And I think a lot of people coming into the industry, we're not artists, we're commercial artists. We sell. That's our job. And I think a lot of juniors coming in want to be artists, and I think that's maybe where the shine comes off a little. But I think if you know what we do and the power of what we can do, I think that's actually quite exciting. So I think the thing that we need to do is get more people that represent the country, and it's not just here in New Zealand. I think this is a problem globally. Like here we've got Māori. There's not enough Māori in the industry to represent. If you think about we're trying to sell and talk to the entire country, we need to have people in our building that are representative of who we're talking to. In order to get cultural insights, to get insights on what we're trying to do, you need to have the people in the building to talk to the people that are out there. And I think that's something that we're trying really hard at DDB to get right. How do we inspire the next generation to come in and actually be the next great people in advertising? So advertising is never going to disappear. It's just going to change shape. And I think there's always a need for what we do. It's just going to how AI, how everything's going to affect it over the next few years. We just got to move with it, and that's the exciting thing. I don't think it's going to change, of course, but I think that change is that's an opportunity. Like we could create the next things, and I think from New Zealand, the way people think here, we could probably really play with this. So I think it's exciting. I'm really looking forward to the next 2-3 years just to see what's going to happen. Or maybe not even 2-3 years, maybe 2-3 months, the way it's moving.
Okay. So sticking to this same topic a little bit longer. Economics in terms of New Zealand now, not the industry, where, I mean, my own parents have moved to Western Australia to be closer to my niece. My brother lived there for 20 years in Perth. My sister, who's in advertising, account servicing side, she now lives in London. She's moved there. And my brother's not in advertising, but the point being, a lot of people have left New Zealand. A lot of my peers have left New Zealand. I don't have a lot of peers who I was at least close to are there any longer. A lot of it, as I'm sure you clearly know, have gone to Australia. And there are many advantages there that New Zealand is not able to offer. I'm sure you have experienced loss of talent to across the pond that way.
Yeah.
What do you do about it? How do you combat that? That's just the reality. It's not an industry problem. It's not an advertising problem. It's not a fucking AI problem. But you're going to
Yeah.
bleed people, and you're bleeding people in New Zealand.
You don't combat it. We actually work with it, like, which I think's you just got to reframe it. Like whenever we're working with people, we sit down and we go, where do you want to be? You know, because everyone's got dreams and hopes, and especially when you live on the edge of the world like we do down here. And as a young person, you need to go and travel. I think travel is one of the most important things you can ever do. I think working in different countries, experiencing different cultures, it just adds to everything that makes you a creative person. And I think you need to go do that. And like, I'll never stop anyone if I'll actually encourage it. So when we're working with development plans for our creative, we normally say to them, where do you want to be? And if they go, I want to be in Amsterdam, or I'm thinking I want to go to London to work, or I'm thinking maybe New York, we go, okay, cool. When do you want to be there? And if they go like 2 years' time, that's the timeline that we play with. And we work with them to get them where they want to be. We don't try and keep them. I think what's really interesting is they will come back eventually. Kiwis in general come back to New Zealand. It's one of the places where they might go for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but generally they come back home. And if they come back home, they come back and work with us. But I like this idea of like just helping people get to where they want to be. And to use an example, we had someone recently who we got out of media design school. It was an internship program. He was with us for about 2 years. He's now moved over to Sydney because he wants to experience a bit of Sydney, bigger city, more money. But in that 2 year period, he went from a junior to winning Grand Prix for us. So it's great. Like, and I can't wait to see him on stages all over the world, picking up more work for other agencies. But when he comes back, I know we can get him back into DDB, and makes me proud seeing anyone who travels and goes and does amazing work.
I think you're right. That is a healthy way of looking at it. No, you're right. And I think New Zealand, you're right. It's probably because of the nature of Kiwis in general, right? Because they're going to leave the nest. So it has to be baked into the way you approach talent cultivation, right? That's great. No, that is exactly the way it should be. I remember I was working at a WPP company once, and I was talking to a local Singaporean guy who's an account servicing guy, and he was saying that it was sour grapes about expats. Let's put it that way. Okay, talking about how Kiwis are traveling everywhere. I was a Kiwi who's moved across to Singapore, and there was an undertone of the sour grapes of expats coming to Singapore and getting paid more. And I asked him this one question. I asked him the question. Let's call him an account director. I can't remember what his title was. I said, okay, so you are at this WPP company in Singapore as an account director, and I offer you the same account director job in this WPP office in New York. I don't care about the salary. Salary is not the point. Would you go? And for whatever reason, it kind of fell quite nicely into my conversation. He said, no. It's like, why? Because, I made my market here. So, well, that's the fucking point. See, you see an expat, but what you're not seeing is someone who's taken the chance to go out and try something new because it enriches who they are. And that is, I never thought about it, but maybe that's because of the fact that I grew up, I spent so much time in New Zealand. I grew up in New Zealand, that you instinctively think that that's the way to do things. Mm. And I wish we had a little bit more of that because, a bit of, what's the saying? If you haven't traveled, you've only read like one page of the book or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And
And
so you mentioned about 15 minutes earlier. You haven't done the Americas, so that's what you're saying. Like you haven't stopped. You've kind of you've achieved a lot of things you've already wanted to achieve, and where's the goalpost, right? You can just keep moving it, and I think that is inherently the nature of what it is to be a good creative, anyway,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, we're forever moving, right? Like, I mean, that's the whole point of living. And I think as a creative person, you've got to keep moving forward. And I think it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like me, traveling countries and moving countries all the time. But I do think you have to keep this belief to move forward. And if someone says, do you want to go? What's the worst that happens? You're going to experience something new. You'll find new experiences with different cultures. You'll learn new things. You'll open up your creative mind a bit more, and it can only help in your thinking. So, I think as a young person, come in, you do some work, go travel, work somewhere else, and then just make sure you got a path. Make sure you got a plan. That plan could be coming back to your home country and doing what you want to do, and staying there for the rest of your career, but just have a bit of a plan. And that's what we say to all our junior creatives and all our creatives. If your plan changes, tell us and we'll help you get there. And even if it does mean we have to say goodbye to them, it just means our pipeline has to be stronger. We've built like a big pipeline now in terms of graduates. We every year we have this graduate program called Ride the Lightning. We get 10 people in. It's a paid internship, so there's no like non-paid internships. This is a proper job. And in the 10 weeks, we train as much as we can. We give as much of our soul and our creative thinking to them. And then at the end of that, we normally hire a few if we can. Our very first year, we hired eight, which which was great. And then obviously, we're just going to keep hiring as many as we can and see the talent. And out of that talent pool, there's been such success. You find some great people, great minds, and they're doing great work. And one day they're going to take my job, and they'll create their next graduate program. So I think it's embrace the juniors coming through, but embrace the fact that they're going to leave, especially if in a small market like New Zealand, and then just work with it, but don't try and stop it. You can't stop it.
So, look, I mean, we thank you for that. So these calls are usually for 1 hour, and we are bang on about 10 minutes to go. So what I would like to do then, for this last 10 minutes of the call, uh, I like to finish off with, well, there's something else I wanted to talk about, but that's fine. Let's talk
Yeah.
about this one topic in the last 10 minutes. And it is literally 10 minutes of you. And in some ways, it's a way to surprise me, as in I know a lot of the people who are coming on here, and that's not always going to be the case. But uh, if I want to have the opportunity to also act like a person looking into a clip to see who Gary Steele is. Gary Steele is the CCO of DDB Aotearoa, and that's fine. But maybe there's something that only you and some people who are closer to you know about you, and I'd like to know a little bit about you. So, Gary, take it away. 10 minutes of something surprise me, something about you that I would love to know.
Well, I think in order to know who I am, you have to kind of start at the beginning. So, I would say when I was in school, I was actually a really bad South African. As in, I couldn't speak Afrikaans. I didn't learn the language, so I was kind of a foreigner in my own country in some regards. My dad was Irish, my mom was English. It was kind of because I didn't speak Afrikaans, I was always in the immigrant class trying to pass the years through Afrikaans. And I don't know if you know this, but in South Africa you need to pass Afrikaans to get into university, because it's a mandatory subject, or at that point in time it was. And there was one thing I wanted to do. It was me and my best mate. We wanted to become architects. And throughout my entire school career, I used to just draw little buildings on each page, like in the corner. And I would design like these houses and buildings and whatever. And I just loved doodling about architecture. So I wanted to do architecture. It was like that was the dream. I think I was like 15, 16, going, that's what I want to do. Um, Unfortunately, my best mate died in a car accident, and that kind of threw a bit of a wobble. Like I was going, because we wanted to start this firm together, and I was like, oh, like I don't know, but maybe I need to follow through. So I was like, okay, I'm still gonna do it. But then I found out I couldn't get into university, and obviously Afrikaans held me back. So I was sitting at home, and it was quite interesting because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I've got to choose something to go and study, or like what am I going to do? And a TV ad came on, and I was sitting watching this TV ad, and it was for BMW, and it's actually quite a famous ad in South Africa, where BMW goes around all Chapman's Peak. I don't know if you've seen it, but it rips off a Mercedes ad. So there was a famous Mercedes ad where it was going around the same Chapman's Peak, and the car lost control, rolled down like 150 meters down this cliff face, and the driver survived. And it was based on a true story. And it was about Mercedes Benz creates really good cars that are safe, safety cell, and all that. But BMW came out and made this ad where it just went around the same corners and nothing happened, and it just ended up with BMW beats the Benz. And I was like, I want to do that. And I was like, I don't know what it is. I had no idea. I was like, don't know what it is, but I want to do that. And from there, I just researched who it was that made that ad, and it was actually Hunter Scaris, and then it was John Hunt. And from there, I was like, I want to do that, but I don't know what it is. I think I fell in love with the pictures, actually. Hence, I'm an art director. And yes, I wanted to do that. And then I researched and found out more. And in order to get into advertising, you had to go study, a diploma in art direction or design. I chose design because I love the visual side of it. And my dad was in reproduction, so I used to love typography and that. And came out, basically begged my way into Hunter Scaris, and then I ended up working with TBWA for 19 years, like 3 different continents. But yeah, John Hunt's still kind of very special, holds a special place for me. But yeah, I'm an art director, and funnily enough, the thing I really like taking is pictures. And I looked about 5 years ago at my library of photographs, and every single picture I love the most has buildings. So yeah, buildings still hold a special place in my heart. So yeah, I like concrete and glass and shapes
I,
and
I
color.
finally understand why you have those kaleidoscope arch graphic pictures now. Thank you. That is
Yes.
actually something I did not know. And incidentally, I actually got into architecture. That was what
Oh
I
yeah.
got into, but I didn't like it. But in
Yeah.
New Zealand, after you do bursary, you get to pick 3 subjects, and architecture was the toughest one to get into.
Uh,
And number 3 was business school. And there was a very pretty girl in business school. That's actually how I moved into
yeah.
business school.
I
So
don't,
yeah,
to be honest, I don't think I would have enjoyed it anyway. I like the theory of what I could do with it. But I think, yeah,
same.
like, so I've thought often about just, packing everything in and becoming like an architectural photographer. Yeah, but like, I don't know. Like, I think my photography journey has evolved. Like, I wanted it to be a career, but now it's just more personal, I think. Like, I've sold all my camera equipment. I've bought like a little Fuji now, a really great little Fuji camera, like one prime lens. And now when I press that shutter, it's not for anything else except me. And if you don't like it, I don't care.
That's great, man. That's yeah. You need to you need to be able to remove yourself and have that. That's something that is just for you, because
Yeah.
the business, certainly if you are taking on the type of role that you've taken on upon yourself, uh, you need that release, and it's always good to do that. And if it can be creative, great. I mean, even fishing works, but if it's photography, if it's, I mean, that I do know X ECDs and stuff who are into the fishing side of things, especially when you're in New Zealand, right? That's a very viable hobby to
Yeah.
have. No, that's thank you for sharing that. You've explained a
Yeah.
little bit more about you that I can't fucking believe I did not know. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Uh,
No
so
worries.
look, we're coming up. We've only got like a couple of minutes anyway.
Yep.
I just wanted to thank you again. There is one more thing that I'm happy to just take it offline. We don't have to do it in the few minutes I have left. But I really appreciate it, my friend. Talk to you very soon. I will be putting up the clips in about a week's time. Um, there's always more, and one of the things I do when I have these conversations with guests is right after I get off the call, I will start making notes for the next one. So maybe it's still when you're in New Zealand, maybe it's somewhere else. Let's see. Let's hopefully you will come back. Hopefully you enjoy what we've done here. I wanted to do this because, like I said earlier on the call, I I realized one day that I know too many people like yourselves, and we only have conversations with each other at the watering hole,
Yeah.
at the occasional bar, at the award ceremonies, at these luncheons, and I felt very much like you were saying, we 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 need to take steps to make sure that talent stays. This was what I think I wanted to do a little bit more of, because I felt I'm having all these beautiful conversations with people like yourselves, and it can't just be for us. And I think it's important that we all talk. One of the things that the proliferation of holding company agencies has done is we've kept all our heads down and we've gotten really busy. I sometimes wonder, I'm not speaking for New Zealand, but in general, are we losing are we losing talent? Because you mentioned the word heroes. I've had this conversation with
Yeah.
people. You're right. When we started, we had heroes. We had the Hunts, right? We had these guys. I had the Michael Sullivans. We had the Toby Talbots, and all these guys were there. And we don't have that anymore. Now, you can argue maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. That's not the point. But the point is, we're human beings, and human beings sometimes need that person to inspire you, to aspire you,
Yeah.
to want to be in it. And
You need
hopefully stuff like
characters.
this helps. Yeah,
We need more
exactly.
characters in the industry. I think we've lost the characters again, which we need more of them. Which means
Oh,
we
hopefully,
need more people coming in.
yeah. Hopefully I get to do my bit by doing stuff like this.
No, it's great.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Man.
Steele.
No worries.